Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer Burrington, and welcome to Smarty Plants, a Minnesota Department of Agriculture podcast that keeps you informed about invasive species affecting our environment and agricultural resources. Spotted-winged drosophila might be small, but it's having a big impact on berry growers and gardeners. This invasive pest targets ripening fruit, making favorites like raspberries, strawberries, and blueberries especially vulnerable. Since showing up in Minnesota, it's become a widespread challenge affecting everything from home gardens to commercial operations. In today's episode, we'll take a closer look at what spotted-winged drosophila is, how to identify it, and what you can do to protect your fruit while still making the most of your harvest. Today, we're joined by two great guests, Mary Rogers and Andy Petran, who bring both research expertise and real-world experience to this topic. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Mary Rogers is an associate professor of sustainable and organic horticultural food production systems in the Department of Horticultural Science at the University of Minnesota. Mary is a horticultural entomologist whose research focuses on integrated pest management, plant-insect interactions, and environmentally friendly strategies to manage invasive pests. Her lab has been studying spotted-winged drosophila and how to manage it in Minnesota since 2015. Andy Petran is the owner of Twin Cities Berry Company, a research and production farm in Isanti, Minnesota. Andy specializes in high-density strawberry production inside modified hoop houses. His work focuses on adapting high-tech greenhouse growing methods to support small and emerging growers who may have limited land or resources. Mary and Andy, welcome to Smarty Plants.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
To start us off, what is spotted-winged drosophila? And why has it become such a concern for berry growers?
Yeah. Spotted-winged drosophila, we'll call it SWD to make it easier. It's a very small fly. It's a vinegar fly in the family of Drosophila. We call them also fruit flies. And it's very similar to a more familiar fly, Drosophila melanogaster, which I think a lot of people have experienced as a nuisance pest or a kitchen pest. But spotted-winged Drosophila is a little unique in that the females have a serrated ovipositor, so that's just a fancy word for their egg-laying structure, and it's toothed or saw-like, and it allows the females to insert eggs inside ripe berries, and so they're kind of competing with us for ripe fruit, and it becomes an economic pest. And it's early on in its invasion stage, it was a real concern because it sort of the population was unchecked by natural enemies. We didn't understand a lot about its biology, and it just has this really rapid, this ability to really rapidly increase in populations very fast. And so it was kind of a five-alarm fire for fruit producers early on in the stages of invasion.
And I think morphologically, it's kind of fascinating how you can have these tiny little differences in between species, right? Like with melanogaster, we've had this history of being able to manage them by just making sure that everything's pretty clean. Just don't let the fruit rot, don't let it drop. But if you have this little tiny difference, so the serrated ovipositor, it totally changes the management techniques. And it's something that growers in this area have never had to deal with before. So figuring out how to do it most effectively and the economic fallout if you don't, or if you just rest on your laurels and do it the way that you've been used to maybe your entire career, you can have these unintended consequences. So forcing us to think on our toes a little bit here. It's an interesting, scary, and morphologically fascinating little problem.
Yeah. Also, in addition to that, with a lot of insect pests, we have thresholds, and with spotted wing, we don't have. There's not a threshold for larvae in fruit. It's a zero threshold level because people don't want to eat maggots in their fruit generally. So even one egg or one developing larvae can completely render that fruit unmarketable, and so you can't sell that fresh fruit. So processing is another consideration, but you get less value for your fruit that way.
So I know it's not anatomically correct, But I always think of it as that she's got a chainsaw on her butt.
Right.
And she can make it. She can make it into
Yeah.
berries. I know, totally wrong.
That's a good way of thinking
No,
of it.
that's
totally
exactly
wrong
how I think of it.
body parts on that fruit fly. But
Right.
that's how I remember it. Because like she's digging into that fruit that I would like to eat as well. And usually fruit flies, most people know them going for like rotting fruit. Like if you leave your banana sit on your counter for way too long and then you have fruit flies.
That's right.
She gets these ones, spotted ring drosophila or SWD, gets in way before things are even close to being
Right.
Yeah, that's
rotting.
That's
Yep.
the biggest difference in that normal fruit flies are sort of an effect of the rot, whereas spotted wing can cause the rot.
Perfect. So, Mary, when was it first discovered in Minnesota, and how has its impact changed over time?
Yeah. SWD was first confirmed in Minnesota in 2012. So we've had it here for about 14 years. It was first found in the U.S. in 2008, and then it just kind of quickly established. Basically, everywhere we looked, we found it. And early on, it was a newer pest people were just learning about. We didn't have natural enemies. We didn't have a lot of management tools. And it was pretty catastrophic overall across the country for fruit growers. And here it was problematic, too, because we never had before SWD's arrival, we didn't have any major fruit pests. And so we were really in this kind of expansion stage for let's grow a lot of fruit. It's easy to grow. It's easy to get certified organic, too. And then spotted wing came and completely changed the scene. Now we're, 14 years into it. We know a lot more. We've had a lot of investment in research and extension. All growers, it's on their radar, anyone who's growing fruit currently. And I think people are getting a little bit more, and I'd like to hear Andy's opinion on this. I think people are getting a little bit more confident about growing fruit again 14 years into it because we've learned a lot.
Yeah, it's due to the learning, and I think just the fact that it's been here and sort of the shock factor is off. And Mary was talking about this. I agree 100%. If you wanted to make a recommendation to a grower of what crop to grow, you could almost always just say, well, just do raspberries, right? They can grow in sandy soil. They don't have a whole lot of nutrient requirements. It's kind of farming on easy mode. There's no such thing as that. But like on the scale of difficulty, you can get this beautiful, delicious, high-value fruit pretty quickly and make a decent amount of revenue off of it. You're never going to have issues with demand. You'll always have a pretty proliferous supply, and there's no huge disease or pest pressures to worry about. And with the introduction of SWD, that entire philosophy was just turned on its head. It went from an easy mode crop to maybe one of the more difficult small fruit, just because, especially raspberries, because they're so soft. It's probably, I'd say, the most preferred fruit commercially grown for SWD to hit.
Right.
Almost to the point where I've heard farmers talk about using raspberries as a trap crop to protect their blueberries or to protect their strawberries. So it's a fascinating sort of development in that we had the shock factor, but now because of all of the research coming out and people becoming more used to it, folks are pivoting back to fruit that had been commonplace in decades prior.
So what does spotted wing Drosophila look like? And how can people tell it apart from other small fruit flies?
Yeah. It's really small.
Yes, they are. They are quite small.
Like 2 to 3 millimeters, if you know what that is. So the males are a little more characteristic because they have this characteristic spot on their wings, which gives them their name. Females don't have that spot, and so it's a little harder to tell females just by looking at them. And sometimes you'll need magnification. So if you're trapping for them with like yellow sticky cards or lured traps that drown them, you can sort the males based on that spot. And then with females, if you have a little hand lens like a 10x, you can once you start to see that chainsaw on their butt, you'll know that what you have on your hands. And so it takes a little bit of experience. But with the larvae, they go through 3 larval instars or development stages. And the first instar is the earliest, and they're kind of hard to see. But by the time they get to level 3, you can see them with the naked eye. And so if you have mushy fruit like a raspberry on your plant and you pull it from the plant, first you'll notice there's a receptacle that's left behind, and that will be, if it's stained red with the raspberry juice, that's kind of a tell that something's going on. And then if you kind of investigate, you smush the fruit in your hand and you'll see the white maggot or the third instar. Then you know for sure what you have.
Yeah, and I'd say just on top of that, you can really tell if you have it based on the effect of its presence rather than it itself, because it's so small. So if you're growing crops, you're doing good cultural practices, you're keeping everything clean, but you still notice rot starting to happen or soft fruit starting to occur, even without seeing the SWD, you can be pretty sure that
mushy
it's there.
Fruit.
Yeah. I can definitely tell when I get to the raspberries in our yard that are just kind of growing wild on the hillside, that I'll pulling a couple of them off and they're fine, and then you get to one and you're like, meh, it still looks okay, but it looks okay, but it's like actually squishy. I'm like, that's probably one that has spotted wing.
Yes.
Let's throw that in the freezer.
Yep.
So, can you, Mary, walk us through the life cycle a little bit more of the spotted wing Drosophila? You've mentioned a couple life stages, the adults and then the larvae and stuff. And how quickly can populations build up?
Yeah, this was key to why it became such a significant pest so fast, is because it's very rapid. So we have the egg stage, and so the females will deposit the eggs inside the fruit, and then the eggs will hatch and they develop inside that fruit. So they're kind of protected while they're feeding inside. And then I mentioned they go through 3 larval instars, and that those are just the stages through development. And then they'll go through a pupation stage, and they do this either in the fruit or the fruit will fall from the plant, and they might do it kind of near the soil surface. And then they'll develop into an adult and then mate, and the whole cycle begins again. So females can lay 300 or more eggs within their lifetime, which is significant. And then if conditions are right, so warm, humid conditions, like think 77 degrees, you can get egg to adult in like 10 days. So you get rapid generation buildup if the conditions are right, and then they're overlapping generations. And so within, just a few weeks, you can go from very low populations to very high populations, which makes it kind of a tough one to manage.
That's the scariest part, I think, is that combo of SWD where it has that serrated ovipositor, the buttsaw, and then also the fact that, like Mary said, you can get 9 to 10 generations in one field season. 9 generations. Wow. That's crazy. So the fact that you can go from a little bit of presence, and I think that's what surprised growers right off the bat, too, is that you didn't notice it at all. And over maybe a couple-week period, you went from 0% infestation to 100% infestation, losing your entire crop. The fact that it came so quickly. So that combination made it very, very economically devastating, especially right off the bat, and still even today.
And it's worse if you have a lot of moisture in the environment. So in years where we're getting ample rainfall, it's a lot worse than summers where we're having extended drought periods. So some years, growers are like, this year, not a problem, but we also didn't have any rain.
Yeah.
So the years that are really good for fruit, are also really good for spotted wing Drosophila.
And obviously they're overwintering in Minnesota. There's been their populations come out kind of right away.
That's a really good point, is they do have this winter morph stage. And so they overwinter as adults, and they go through this sort of developmental switch in the fall where they're not reproductive anymore. And they're kind of going through the stage where they're acclimating themselves to overwintering conditions. And so they can overwinter in leaf litter and kind of these protected environments, and then emerge in the spring, and then they'll start their reproductive stage again. But I think there's probably a little bit of a combination between some overwintering populations here, as well as new individuals kind of coming in from warmer areas.
Yeah, I think we have this combination, again, of it's being so difficult to manage because you have these overwintering populations in combination with populations from other areas coming in. So even if you do the perfect job, which is impossible, but let's say you do the best job you can possibly do managing SWD on your farm, it does not guarantee that it's not going to be there next year, because you can't make sure everyone else does a perfect job too, or you can't make sure that the native environment around your property isn't harboring them as well. So it has a staying power because this combination of its ability to emigrate from other areas and also to overwinter in the same area. I've seen spotted winged Drosophila in my house, like in January at times. Yes, I have. I've found them, which was not good for morale, but interesting from a scientific perspective.
So how significant are the economic impacts of spotted winged Drosophila for growers and local agriculture?
Yeah, anecdotally, I'm hoping maybe Mary has some exact numbers in terms of the economy statewide, but anecdotally, just from my own experience and talking to other growers, like I said, you can go from having a thriving operation to completely losing your crop in one field season. And if that's a reality, which it is for SWD, it can have this massive economic impact, not only in the reduction in supply for consumers, but also the viability of small farms in general. Like I said, you can have raspberry go from an easy mode crop to probably something that's not even viable if you're not taking care of the SWD on your farm. So the economic impact can be huge. It can force you to spend more money on control, to completely adapt your practices, to pivot to completely different crops. And if your infrastructure is based on one specific thing and you have to completely change that infrastructure just because of one little invasive insect, it can have these reverberating effects not only on your own farm, but the economy of the entire state.
Yeah, back in like 2018, 2019, when we were really getting hit by spotted wing, and we were starting to see the impacts. We worked with an applied economist, Gigi DiGiacomo at the University of Minnesota, and she estimated the impact just on raspberries in our state to be $2 million in losses, and that we considered a conservative estimate because it didn't get at the loss of acreage that would have been planted if spotted wing hadn't been present. So it can be pretty significant. And we're not a huge fruit producing state, but $2 million is a lot. And that doesn't also get at the impact that it had on home gardeners or community gardeners and the folks growing raspberries as a hobby.
And we're not a huge fruit-producing state, but we're a massive fruit-consuming
That's true. We love our fruit.
state. I think Driscoll's did an analysis and found that the Twin Cities metro
We're a hot market for fruit.
We consume more raspberries and small fruit per capita than any other metropolitan area in the entire United States. So
which should drive our local production.
Exactly.
Right? Yes.
Like I have found this since I started my farm. The demand is absolutely there. Even just for my strawberries, I have never not sold out of strawberries at a single farmer's market. We have the best.
We have huge demand.
Yes, we have huge demand. So when a fly like this comes up and potentially disrupts the supply, you have this massive economic fallout, but even a social fallout too, because people love buying local produce for the taste and also for supporting, their communities. So it's a Drosophila disruptor, I guess you could say.
Perfect. Well, and we've talked a little bit about wild host plants, kind of mentioned it a little, but how do wild host plants like buckthorn or elderberry play a role in spotted winged Drosophila population?
Yeah, it plays a significant role, and this is also one of the things that makes management so challenging is we have a lot of, so for the crop hosts, we talked a lot about raspberries, blueberries, also sour cherries are a host. But then there's all of this non-crop host in the host plants in the environment. And so if you're imagine having a fruit farm and you're looking at these sort of edges of the field where you have wild kind of unmanaged habitat, you're going to have buckthorn, you're going to have wild honeysuckle, maybe elderberry. These plants are all hosts. And so spotted wing is able to take advantage of those non-crop hosts in the environment and kind of move back and forth. Or they're there earlier, depending on the phenology of the fruit and when these wild non-crop hosts are ripe. So you'll have a population there already. And it's hard to manage, right? So we have I'm involved with a current project at the University of Minnesota looking at the extent that invasive honeysuckle is supporting spotted wing Drosophila, and so it's a great case of invasive supporting invasives. But yeah, they act as bridges really, and reserve or a reservoir for these populations.
The social fallout of this reality, I'm telling you, as a farmer, it can get depressing, but then you get to a certain point where it's almost a relief because you realize, I don't have to worry about wondering if it's here or when it's going to come. Because that first step of being scared of it arriving can have sort of mental effects on you as a grower. But once you get to past that denial phase or worry phase or anxiety stage, in the off season, you can think, okay, I know it's coming. So now what can I do about it? Being able to get past that hurdle, I don't even worry about if it's here anymore because I know that it is.
Right.
And that means I can devote all of my energy into figuring out how to reduce the population, reduce the effect on my revenue, and increase the viability of the farm.
Perfect. For listeners who may have just a few berry plants in their yard, like myself, why should they worry about this pest?
Yeah. I think, we all want to eat our fruit, and we're not going to eat it if it has maggots in it, right? So it's going to reduce, the overall quality and number of fruit that you get out of your home garden and your plots at home. And you also could be. I think it's worthwhile thinking about how good management and stewardship too, because you don't. If you're not taking care of your fruit, then you're serving as a reservoir for other folks around, and you're just kind of maintaining that population. But I would say it's a little easier on a smaller scale, right, to manage it. Frequent harvesting. And then just keeping your plants clean and kind of making sure that you don't have a lot of overripe kind of rotting fruit around. Some growers I've heard of or gardeners will use landscape fabric, and then it's easy to kind of clean up any fruit that falls. I know a friend of mine has a sour cherry tree in her backyard, and she really loves those cherries. And so she invested in net, a net that she just put over her tree when the fruit was green and still hard and not ripened yet. And so that way she had some fruit protected from spotted wing. So that can definitely help. So I think, things like frequent harvesting, sanitation, these are all really good tools. Andy also did some work when he was in the lab at the University of Minnesota on pruning, and just kind of because the flies really love kind of this cool, humid, protected habitat. If you prune your plants and kind of open up that canopy, that's better for plant health. It reduces diseases, and it can also reduce the habitat for spotted wing.
Correct. And there are these recommendations that researchers will observe all the time based on their meticulous observations. And some of the recommendations, they sync better with a more commercial scale. Like if you have to use a spray, there are very few home growers that are using insecticides, and I would agree with that 100%. But then there are some recommendations that are unfeasible at a large scale. Things like making sure that the understory of your 5-acre blueberry farm is totally free of blueberries. That's not going to happen.
Right.
But it is something that can happen if you just have a couple plants in your backyard. I also have just a couple of raspberry plants in my backyard as well because I'm a sicko. I work with fruit all day, and then I come home and work with fruit. Something, if you are a home grower and you want to observe to help keep maybe the leaf litter down or things in a just feasible environment, not only for yourself but for keeping SWD concentrations low, I would encourage you to observe your raspberries this year and see if the flowers are occurring on only the green canes or if they're also growing on the brown canes. And we can get into the scientific jargon about all this if we want to. But basically, if you are noticing that you are getting fruit on your green canes, you can go ahead and mow down every single cane at the end of the field season. Just mow them all down because then they're just going to come back up the next year and you will get fruit every single year, and you don't have to worry about this intensive pruning techniques. That's why you get these brambles, because you feel overwhelmed with, well, what am I going to prune? Which brown ones do I keep? Which brown ones do I remove? If you're getting the fruit on that green cane, just mow everything down. Remove every single cane every single year, and they're going to pop right back up and give you more fruit. And it will help keep SWD overwintering populations a little bit lower locally.
Something I'll have to look for on my raspberries this year. So what should people look for in their fruit to know if spotted wing Drosophila might be present? We talked about it a little bit earlier, but now when this will be about the time that when people are out harvesting their fruits, what should they look for?
Is this for you?
This one's real easy. If the fruit falls apart in your hand, that's what you should look for. If you stick your hand in and your first reaction is, ooh, boy, that probably means that you've got some SWD. Just the biggest effect is going to be sunken fruit. It's going to be this degradation of the cell wall structure because the larvae are eating through as they're growing and getting larger. And also just looking for the physical presence of the flies themselves. If you want to think about, if you're seeing something flying around you and it looks like it could be a Drosophila or it could be something else, I'd say Mary Drosophila are more of lazy flyers. They kind of hover more. Mm-hmm. And so if you notice something zipping around real fast, it's probably not going to be SWD. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
They are more present at dawn and dusk. Mm-hmm. They like this kind of, they don't like direct heat and sun.
The crepuscular.
That's right. That's a great word.
Like beavers.
So sometimes you'll go out. I don't know if you've observed this, but if you go out really early in the morning to your fruit plants, and you might see like clouds of these little, and it's like, oh no, I hate to see that. But That's another sign. Some folks will trap for them, and that I think that happened a lot. The adult traps were something that we were recommending for monitoring early on, kind of in the invasion period. But now I think we should. It's safe to assume that you're just going to have them, and now I think people are a lot better at noticing that mushy fruit or that sunken fruit, and as an indication that there's larvae.
Yeah, I think what we've observed over time is that the traps were useful at the beginning of this invasion, but they're not super effective at considerably or significantly reducing the overall local population. So don't think that you can put some traps in and use that to solve your SWD problem.
Perfect. So if someone finds a larvae in their fruit, because it's a little squishy or even if it's not, is it still safe to eat, and what should they do with it?
So this is a really good question, and it's going to be based on your personal preferences, personal tolerances. If you can't stand the idea of eating an infested fruit, or even with just a tiny little egg in it, you can throw them out, and then that's your way of keeping a clean environment to reduce the probability of future fruit getting that infestation because you're removing the next generation from the environment. If you do notice it a tiny bit and you're not noticing the sunken fruit yet, if you just are noticing a couple flies and you're worried about getting to that phase where everything's falling apart in your hands, you can just pick the ripening or totally ripe fruit and just freeze it, because you may get a couple eggs in there, but it's totally indistinguishable. You won't be able to, especially if you've put it through the freeze-thaw cycle. Not only will it kill the egg or kill the larva, but it will.
Oh, yeah.
If you have plans of processing your fruit in the first place, then SWD isn't going to be as big of a deal for you. Let's say you're growing raspberries in the backyard because you love raspberry jam, or you want to make some strawberry syrup or something like that. You can still take fruit that has some eggs in it, or maybe a first instar developing larva that it's not falling apart in your hand. You can still freeze that and totally safe. There's nothing toxic about the larva. There's nothing toxic about the egg. You can absolutely still use that as an ingredient in your processed goods. And it's a good way, from a home standpoint, of still making use of your fruit if you get an infestation. And if you're a grower, if you do get a decent size infestation in your field, it could be an option of you, instead of selling them as fresh, just picking everything as soon as you can, freezing it, and then using it for a processed good production if you have a commercial kitchen or a cottage food license or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. My recommendation to people is that if the fruit looks good, it's good. At the, egg and first instar stages are completely undetectable and not harmful at all. If you get a little bit of softening, like Andy said, processing. I also recommend just, keeping those berries refrigerated and cold immediately. If you can get them into the refrigerator after harvest, that's going to improve the quality. And you won't have any further development.
Removing that field heat, it's good for the shelf life of the fruit, but then also good for reducing the infestation rate.
So, Andy, what has Twin Cities Berry Company done on your farm to manage and control spotted wing Drosophila? And are there particular strategies or tools that have worked well for you?
The number one most important thing that we've done, and we've done it for several reasons. This is a practice that has multiple benefits, but it also has been nice for SWD. We've pivoted all of our production inside of hoop houses. So high tunnels, caterpillar tunnels, think of them as just slightly lower tech greenhouses. We do not grow anything in the open field anymore. And I have a lot of economic, social, and environmental philosophies that align with that practice. But if we're just focusing in on SWD, one of the most important things you can do is move everything inside a controlled environment. And then for all of your entry points, all of your ventilation points, if you have sidewalls, you can buy this thing called insect netting. It's this really fine mesh. And if you attach it onto every single interface between the outside world and your tunnel, it will provide what's called just this physical barrier that helps keep the outside pests from getting in, with SWD being one of those. If you're looking to buy this for yourself, I think the mesh density is measured in like grams per meter or something like that. So if you get a 75 or 85 gram per meter mesh, and they will have that labeled on the websites where you can buy it from, that is tight enough to keep SWD from getting in. I will say that achieving 100% exclusion with this method is impossible, and that's a fool's errand. You can sink as much time as you want into completely getting rid of this external pressure inside your controlled environment. But if you can get to like 95% exclusion, that means the ones that get in are going to be much more manageable. Maybe you can use traps to control the 5% that get in. Or if you are forced into a position from a commercial standpoint where you have to use a spray, not only does the physical exclusion keep that spray frequency down, but it also almost completely eliminates the risk of pesticide drift from getting outside of those tunnels. So if you only spray Pyganic or Entrust or something inside, then you don't have to worry nearly as much about a wind coming by while you're spraying and bringing it into a neighboring field or into a neighboring habitat, something like that. So physical exclusion has been our number one thing. Like I said, there will be – I think we had 1 year where one of our tunnels got a pretty decent infestation anyways, and then we did have to resort to a spray in order to tamp down on that SWD. We are not – certified organic at this time, but we use as many organic practices as we can. We still use totally organic sprays. Mary, from my experience, and I believe from when I was still in academia, one of the only sprays that was organically approved that worked was called Entrust. It's spinosad is the active ingredient. It's quite effective, but it's also incredibly expensive. So that should never be, for anything, for any pest, it's my philosophy that a spray should never be your first line of defense. It should always be your last resort. But if you do get to that point, putting some spinosad onto the plant is probably going to be your best bet if you want to keep it on the organic route.
Have you noticed, too, that besides spotted wing Drosophila, that the fruit quality is just much better in your tunnels than in the open field environment?
So much better.
And so you get it's kind of,
Yeah.
if you're doing it, you might as well try to exclude them, right?
Correct. We've noticed, I did a 3-year trial comparing a lot of different aspects from tunnel-grown strawberries versus open-field-grown strawberries. And one of the biggest differences that we noticed is the percent marketability of the fruit. Just because it's not going to be as susceptible to wild swings in temperature. You're not going to have to worry about hailstorms or just getting knocked around in the wind as much. If you don't have an SWD infection, we can have around 95% marketability of our strawberries if they're grown inside a tunnel, the way that we do it, versus if you have open field strawberries, especially the day neutrals that we grow that go into August, September, you can have 50% marketability or less. So there's a multitude of benefits from growing inside a controlled environment. And the economic one is huge because not only will you have higher yields, but you'll have a higher percent marketability as well.
Mm-hmm. Andy's not going to say this himself, but he's been really clever at figuring out how to use the fruit that isn't quite damaged, like with your fruit leather at the farmer's market and the syrup.
Yes.
So good. So the fruit that you're not selling fresh and ripe or that might have blemishes or imperfections or maybe minor spotted wing, you can process.
From a personal business standpoint, we've gotten to the point where we make more money per pound of fruit from the processed good
really
than we do. Yes.
And it's just because no one else is really doing it,
yeah,
right?
It's a combination of the quality of the product, plus I think we've done a decent job with marketing and with labeling. I hired a graphic designer to have really nice labeling on our products. When you have to understand the psychology, this is going to be a farmer's market podcast now. You have to understand the psychology of the average farmer's market consumer, and they want to buy something nice, and they want to feel like they got something beautiful. So if you're just slapping a black and white sticker on a jar of jam, that's going to have a much lower probability of being purchased. Whether if you just put a couple $100s into hiring a graphic designer to just make it look pretty, that's what people want almost more than the product itself. So you can clear out your supply. You can do a little bit of a premium because people want to feel like they got something nice.
And so you almost have no waste,
yes,
right?
We have almost zero waste. We use every part of the buffalo being a strawberry. We have this wonderful product called a fruit shrub, which is a fruit-infused drinking vinegar, and we macerate a lot of the juice out of the strawberry and then cold press it into a white wine vinegar. But then we still have like these spent strawberries. Mm-hmm. And I remembered a story I heard about craisins, Ocean Spray using the spent cranberries from making their cranberry juice and drying them, throwing a little sugar on it, and selling it. It used to be a waste product, but now they make more money from that waste product than they do from the cranberry juice. And I thought that was super clever. So I took the spent strawberries and I started making a puree and turning it into fruit leather. And now the fruit leather has gotten so popular that I don't have enough spent strawberries from the shrub to satisfy the demand. So I'll take totally ripe, fresh strawberries and turn that into fruit leather. So we'll harvest twice a week. The early week harvest almost entirely goes towards processed goods production, and then the late week harvest goes to the fresh for the weekend farmers markets.
Nice. Yeah, I know a lot of people try to do like the fruit leathers at home and stuff.
Yes.
All the trays.
It's so finicky.
It's so nice.
It's my least favorite thing to make, but people just love it. It's the only product I make that my daughter eats too.
Yep. It's like just the I remember like fruit by the foot and like all those other things and stuff, and it's just one.
But healthier because
it's
I tell people it's a fruit roll-up that's actually fruit.
Yes, there you go. Perfect. Well, that's good. I'm glad you're able to use all of them. So going back kind of to talk about home growers a little bit here, what are some simple, effective steps that home growers can take to reduce spotted wing Drosophila problems?
Yeah. I think with these processing things we were talking about, it's a good way of using some fruit that might be less than perfect.
Yeah.
But really, it kind of goes back to the basics of just watching your fruit, picking when it's ripe as frequently as possible, especially if this is raspberries, because, raspberries could almost be picked daily because they'll keep ripening. So not letting that fruit stay on the plant too long, not letting it go overripe, cleaning up excess fruit, keeping things pruned and kind of sanitizing clean. And these are all good strategies anyway for keeping your plants healthy and productive. And then just those that keeping post-harvest, picking your fruit, keeping it cold is important.
I'd piggyback on that. The only other thing I would add is because the SWD has this massive generational frequency per field season. You can get 9 generations per field season, and you get this population density buildup where as the field season goes on, you just get more SWD, more SWD, and more SWD, where when we get to probably, Mary, I'd say late August to early September is when populations are going to be
the highest.
Yeah, are going to be the highest. So if you plan your backyard garden in a way that doesn't line up with that population density spike, then you're just going to have less native risk of the SWD being there. So there are some blueberry cultivars that will fruit a little earlier than that massive spike. If you grow June-bearing strawberries, instead of the day neutrals that we do, where you're going to have most of your harvest at the beginning of the field season, you almost don't have to worry about SWD very much at all. We call this phenology management, where you're trying to desync the ripening and harvest period with the population density spike of the pest. So growing crops that don't line up with the time of highest population density is something that you can do when you're planning in the off-season. And then when you combine that with everything Mary said, you can probably have a pretty decent chance of reducing your infection rate even without the use of sprays.
Well, perfect. And then, Mary, what new research is underway to manage SWD more effectively?
Right. So a couple exciting things are happening. I've been involved with, because this is a national pest, a lot of the research that we've done on this has been multi-state. And our last multi-state funding opportunity was really looking at biological control and trying to suppress spotted wing Drosophila with other insects. So we call this biological control, or by using natural enemies. And a lot of effort had been traditionally focused on this classical biocontrol model of going into Asia and the locations where spotted wing was native and looking for what is suppressing it there, and then a lot of research and investigation and choosing and selecting the right agent that's a specialist that we could maybe import and release for fruit farms here. So that process has been going on, but in the interim, we've started to see this tiny parasitoid wasp. So this is a wasp that's non-stinging. It doesn't have any interest in humans at all, and it's called Leptopolina japonica. And it happens to be a Drosophila generalist, so it will attack spotted wing Drosophila as well as other like Drosophila melanogaster, other Drosophilids that are non-target, which is not what we really want in a biocontrol agent. We want things to be specific and targeted. But this seems to be where we're looking for it. Everywhere we're looking for it, we're finding it. So we don't know how it got here, but it has appeared particularly in these woody, unmanaged areas where there's a lot of buckthorn or wild honeysuckle or elderberry, this non-crop fruit that we were talking about. This is where we're seeing this Leptopolina japonica. And I think that since it's here, it's providing some suppression. And so this is kind of where we're looking. And this is it's not a bad strategy really, because it's pesticide free and it's taking advantage of things that are just here naturally. Of course, if you have a heavy spray rotation program, you're probably killing it along with the flies. But so we're keeping an eye on this Leptopolina japonica. And since we're in this, 14 years, we've seen this with other invasives too, is that there's a little bit of, nature finds a way. There's things that take advantage of resources when they're overabundant and things start to kind of balance out again. So although they're non-natives, this could be something interesting. But of course, I think looking at potential non-targets of other other drosophilids and the food web kind of ecological consequences of that will be important. Another thing we're doing is there's been a lot of development on this sterile male technology, and this is through some biotechnology creating populations of males in the lab that will mate with females, but they don't result in offspring. So if you get enough of these males released on farms, they will you can crash the population if they outcompete the wild males. So this is really interesting. It's another completely non-pesticidal method of control. It also would work really well with the biocontrol because you're targeting two different life stages here, the reproduction, so you won't get the egg, but also when you do have eggs and larvae, if you have this parasitoid, it's attacking that stage. So these are two things that I think are kind of exciting, and I know growers are interested in the sterile male release. Of course, this technique is really going to be more applicable for commercial farms, larger farms, than, it's not really something a home gardener would use. But it's still sort of, it's in its, I guess, its later stages of research and development. So we're expecting to see some commercial products of these sterile males available pretty soon. So those are kind of the two things new things we're sort of keeping our tabs on and looking at.
Mary, do you know, are the researchers doing anything to make these sterile males more alluring to the females than the ones who did not receive a vasectomy?
Would have to, behaviorally, they would have to really be competitive with the males that are already in the environment. And so that what we're seeing is that they act just like a drosophilid raised in the wild. That's the other thing is they're lab reared, and so you need them to be hardy and competitive, but in order for it to be worthwhile. But yeah,
great.
Well, perfect. And then to kind of give people, to give our listeners a little bit more information on management resources, do you have any locations that they can get that information?
There's a ton of good resources on University of Minnesota Extension pages. I would also plug the fruit and vegetable newsletter, and they'll have timely updates on spotted wing Drosophila as well as other tips for fruit and veg growers. I think that the MDA also has some good resources on invasive pests. So this is part of spotted wing Drosophila resources are definitely on the MDA pages as well.
I think because we're 14 years in now.
There's lots. There's a lot of, yeah.
Now we have bulletin boards, we have social media posts, we have podcasts now.
Growers have, they sometimes will have the most innovative, creative ideas. So I think,
just going to conferences and
talking with other fruit growers.
Yeah, talking with other fruit growers is going to be very important too.
Yep, there's a couple throughout the year. We have the fruit and vegetable growers and the organic conferences and things like that all talk about a lot of these. So if you are interested in getting, if people are interested in getting involved and possibly doing some more fruit production on their in their backyard or even on a small farm, there are these education opportunities, especially in the fall, in the winter, when everybody's not out in the field growing things and taking care of their plants and picking berries, to do all these education opportunities and stuff. So we do have a couple of those listed on our website, on the Department of Agriculture website also, and we try to send out information to register for them as well. Well, thank you both. This has been a really great conversation, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners did too. This has been Smarty Plants, a podcast from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Our producers are Brittany Ravel and Sadie Anderson. Our editor is Larry Schumacher, and I have been your host. You can learn more about invasive species and plant pests at www.mda.state.mn.us. And while you're checking that out, we'll be working on the next episode of Smarty Plants. See you there.